The case of Katherine Nevan. 55-year-old Tom Nevan was fatally shot in his pub, Jack White's, near Arklow, in the early hours of March. He was killed by a single shotgun blast to the side, as he was counting the takings after the St. Patrick's holiday weekend. His car, which was driven away after the robbery, was later discovered abandoned at Dartmouth Square in Dublin. Today, members of the investigation team took Mr. Nevan's widow, Katherine, into custody when she was visiting Dublin. She was arrested in the Balibo area of the city at lunchtime and brought to the Bridewell Garda station, where she was charged with the murder of her husband and with soliciting others to murder him in 1989 and 1990. Shortly afterwards, she was taken before Judge Michael Canelon in the nearby Dublin District Court. Katherine Nevan, née Lee Scully, was born on October 1, 1950 in the small village of Nerney, County Kildare. Growing up in a modest two-bedroom house with her brother and sister, she attended Premeditation College Kildare, an all-girls school run by nuns. Katherine excelled as a student, known for her diligence and deft hands. After leaving school, she invested in sewing machines and traveled the country, providing dressmaking lessons. She then ventured into the world of makeup, completing a beauty course and delivering lectures on makeup and presentation, where she demonstrated her exceptional teaching skills. Katherine's first significant employment was as receptionist at the oldest hotel in Dublin, the Castle Hotel. Her colleagues described her as highly efficient, glamorous, and ambitious, with aspirations to establish her own model agency. At the young age of 21 in 1971, she met Tom Nevan, a regular visitor to the hotel who was 10 years her senior. Their romance blossomed, and they married in Rome in 1976. Tom was a relatively wealthy, shy, and down-to-earth man, originally from the County Galway village called Tina. He was the eldest of 9 children and had a great love for sports, especially hurling. His easygoing charm, combined with Katherine's ambition, was a potent combination. When he married Katherine, he was managing his uncle's pub in Dolphin's Barn, Dublin. Over the years, Tom and Katherine went on to acquire and manage many properties around the city of Dublin, with Katherine being very hands-on in decorating the properties and collecting the rents. In March 1986, Tom and Katherine decided to purchase Jack White's pub in Britis Bay, County Wicklow, which is the setting for our story. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to our new channel, where we uncover captivating and chilling cold cases that will keep you on the edge of your seat. You won't want to miss the twists and turns we have in store. Let's continue. They worked keeping the pub open from 8:30 a.m. until late at night. Britis Bay is a 4-kilometer stretch of beach on the Irish seacoast, and the beach and associated dunes are highly popular with Dubliners, being one of the most frequented beaches by residents of the capital during the summer. Acquiring Jack White's pub and restaurant was a very lucrative move for the Nevans. However, this is where Katherine's true nature emerged, and her marriage began to deteriorate. Katherine was a bossy, bullying individual who was abusive towards both Tom and her young staff. While some may have seen her as a motherly figure, the general consensus was that she was a nightmare to work for. She had no qualms about belittling Tom in front of the staff and berating her young staff members, who would later speak out against her. An example of her pettiness was told by one staff member, where one night after closing, the staff and Tom were sitting around chatting and having a laugh. When Katherine came into the bar, she didn't like what she saw and confiscated the staff's tip jar, which was so petty and spiteful. Tom was affectionately known to the staff as Daddy. He was a gentle giant, standing at 6 feet 3 inches tall, and was caring and quiet. The staff loved him, and he would go out of his way to help any of them. However, Katherine ruled the workplace with an iron fist. One staff member reported that she was so strict and ruthless that her behavior bordered on inhumane. Kathleen, a cleaner on the staff, was told to come in early to redo rooms that she had already cleaned. At one point, Katherine asked the cleaner to work full-time, and when the cleaner refused, Katherine retaliated by contacting the social welfare officers and reporting that Kathleen had refused full-time work, thereby making her ineligible for government assistance. Katherine's actions were petty and vindictive. As early as 1986, Katherine and Tom were no longer a married couple. Tom slept in the staff quarters while Katherine occupied the main bedroom, openly entertaining male friends just doors away from Tom's room. A deeply disrespectful situation. Although Katherine had requested a divorce multiple times, Tom refused, as he had already annulled his first marriage, and his Catholic upbringing made him reluctant to go through another failed marriage. If Tom had granted the divorce, he might still be alive today, spared the years of humiliation before his staff, friends, and patrons. Between 1989 and 1991, Katherine desperately wanted to end the marriage, making no fewer than 18 requests to have her husband killed. She stood to benefit greatly from his death, as she would inherit the pub worth 670,000 Irish pounds, their 2 Dublin properties worth $1 million at the time and a 78,000 payout from an insurance policy, along with 197,000 Irish pounds in cash. Katherine was not only all I've said above, but she was also a bit of a gore, as we would call her here in Ireland. She had men left, right, and center with no shame, and she loved men in high-profile jobs. If someone high-profile visited Jack White's, she would fall over herself, as she was a bit of a sex kitten and used her sexuality to her advantage, with short skirts, low tops, and high heels. On Tuesday, March 1996, Tom and Katherine were to celebrate their 10th anniversary of owning Jack White's pub. It was just after Paddy's weekend, so the pub was extra busy. Tom didn't get the chance to go to the bank, and on the Tuesday evening, he was downstairs in the kitchen of the pub, counting the weekend's takings, while Katherine was asleep upstairs. According to Katherine, she was awoken by someone pressing her face into a pillow, and a man was shouting, "Jewelry, kill you," with a knife in his hand. Katherine was then tied up by her attacker. After a while, she heard 2 vehicles speeding away. She managed to get to a panic button, and the garter arrived around 4:30 a.m. They found Tom slumped on the kitchen floor in a pool of blood with a gunshot to his chest, still wearing his glasses and a pen in his hand. He was surely dead. A sum of 13,000 Irish pounds, equivalent to 16,500 euro today, was stolen, along with Tom's car, which would later be found in Dublin City, abandoned. It looked like a robbery gone wrong. But despite Katherine's story, there were no signs of a 4th entry, and the phone cards had not been pulled out of the walls, but 2 were off the hook. Katherine's bedroom was in a state of disorder, but it did not appear to have been systematically searched, and jewelry had been scattered around, but none was taken. From the time of the shooting, it would take Katherine a total of 2 hours before she pressed the alarm button to alert authorities of the break-in. She would greet the garter scantily clad, and tell them she had been tied up with her own black tights, and her underwear had been thrust into her mouth as a gag. A guard of fingerprints expert found drawers discouraged on the floor, which appeared to have been lifted from the sides and placed on the ground. None of the doors and windows in the pub showed signs of forced entry. She had not gone to her husband's separate bedroom for help once she had freed herself. A witness would recall how on the day of the murder, Katherine had told staff they were not welcome to stay there that night in the pub, as they had often done after a night out, especially after a bank holiday weekend. While many of the circumstances seemed suspicious, and the Gardaí were confident they had their killer, there was still a lack of firm evidence, no forensics, no white witnesses, and no admission of guilt. Circumstantial evidence would not be enough to convict her. However, while they built their case, Cat Ram would play the grieving widow to a T, all dressed in black, carrying a single red rose and lapping up the sympathy pool from family, friends, and people who knew them through their businesses. Katherine even installed a huge headstone at Tom's gravesite and writings of poetry inscribed, showing her love for Tom. She even took out an advertisement in a local newspaper that spoke of her devotion to Tom. It would take until April 1997 for Katherine to be arrested, shortly after she had sold the pub for £500,000. When she was later charged with murder and solicitation to murder, she had already become one of the most widely discussed and recognizable individuals in the country. Later, Tom's family would petition the courts to freeze all assets until the conclusion of the trial, including the proceeds from the pub's sale. In February, the first trial collapsed when it became known that the jury's deliberations had been overheard. The second trial was delayed when Katherine was hospitalized, but resumed a few days later. Katherine pleaded not guilty, and as the prosecution had only circumstantial evidence, they heavily relied on the testimony of 3 specific witnesses. Between 1989 and 1991, Katherine had approached these 3 men, who became the key witnesses for the prosecution. The first man was William McLean, a self-admitted smuggler from County Monaghan, who was among the initial barmen employed at Jack White's pub when the Nevans acquired it. He was also Katherine's first known extramarital companion, and he claimed to have been compensated solely through her kindness. Years later, he received a phone call from Katherine, informing him that she was hospitalized following a heart attack. However, it was in fact a cosmetic surgery procedure. She offered him £20,000 and the prospect of rekindling their relationship if he agreed to kill Tom. His response was a firm refusal. The second man was John Jones, a former member of the political party Sinn Féin, who ran an advice clinic at the back of his shop in Dublin. She had offered to host meetings in the pub to gain favor with the IRA. She visited his shop one day and directly requested that he have the IRA kill Tom. Jones thought she was joking and refused. A few weeks later, she would return with the same plan, but Jones would decline again. She even showed up at his business premises, bruised and bandaged, claiming that Tom had assaulted her. In fact, she had undergone cosmetic surgery again. As it seems, our Katherine was fond of such procedures in the past. Eventually, she got the message and stopped asking. The third of these witnesses was Jerry Heaps, a former member of the Provisional Irish Republican Army, and he worked for John Jones in his shop. It was Jones who had originally introduced Jerry to Katherine. She approached him at least 10 times, asking him to help her kill Tom. Then she suggested to him that Tom could be killed during one of his weekly visits to the flats he owned, as it would be an opportune moment, since he would have the pub takings with him. Every time Jerry refused, she would come up with another idea. One of these involved ambushing him after having a meal out with Katherine. He told her he couldn't do that because the bulk of the shot would pass through him and hit her. Katherine's response to this was that it would look great if Tom was to die in her arms. Jerry said no once again. Katherine also would have an affair with Guard Inspector Tom Kennedy, an affair he would deny in court. This affair began in 1991. Several staff members would say in court that Kennedy was a frequent visitor to the pub, and one staff member said she had seen him and Katherine in bed together on several occasions. Kennedy would say that Tom was his friend, and he was the only reason he went to the pub. But Tom would say different to one of his staff, the morning after a retirement party that was held at the pub for Kennedy, where Katherine would gift him paid flights to New York to visit his children, a very generous gift on Katherine's part. Kennedy will go on to say to the guardie that Katherine was the type of woman who would give you a pain in the head when she started getting on about things. He said he was aware of the rumors of him and Katherine having an affair, but that he was over 60 and that sex would not be a concern of his. Next, we have Judge Danica Buckler, who was introduced to Katherine by Tom Kennedy. Edward said he too had an affair with her, which he also denied, just like Kennedy. It was also stated that he had his own key to the pub and would let himself in and out at all hours of the night. Allegedly, Tom was very upset by this affair, according to staff members, and he would frequently argue with Katherine over it. Katherine would later go on to deny these affairs in court. On the day before Tom's murder, Monday, March, the bar and lounge saw steady customer traffic. The only unusual occurrence that day was a visit by a strange man wearing a long overcoat and carrying a bag. This man then went to make a phone call, and one of the staff said he was muttering into the phone. He spoke to Tom, and the staff presumed Tom knew him, given the nature of their conversation. This man was not seen leaving the pub that day, and it is possible that he did not leave, but instead hid in the pub and later, in fact, shot Tom. Also, after Tom died, and Katherine was under investigation for his murder, there was no objection to oppose her taking on the license of the public house exclusively. The Judge Danica Buckler would be the one to grant her the license in his private chambers. Another theory was that the captain herself was the one who pulled the trigger, as she was the only one in the pub that night. Tom did not appear to act defensively immediately prior to it. He still had his glasses on his nose, and his pen was in his hand when the guards found him. He would not have been unduly surprised by her arrival in the kitchen. While there was no evidence of firearm residue found on her clothing, They only tested the clothes she was wearing on that night. But she could have changed her clothes before she tied herself up. After all, she had 2 hours before she got help. She also admitted to washing her hands before their arrival. In another scenario, Katherine would have had to be assisted by an accomplice who tied her hands and took the money, the gun, and the car to Dublin. The other theory is that Katherine helped one or more people to carry out the killing. The trial of the notorious Black Widow, as she was dubbed, captivated the nation from start to finish, and she quickly became one of the country's most high-profile killers. She assassinated Tom's character by claiming he was abusive and alcoholic. Despite Katherine's continuously glamorous appearance and impeccable grooming, her tight-lipped expression and stubborn chin, along with her apparent determination to appear matronly rather than seductive, could not be concealed. Her appearance was part of the extensive web of lies she had constructed to shield herself. The media reported on Katherine's appearance from her clothes, her hair, and makeup, and even down to her nail polish. In court, it became such a problem that Judge Carl put a ban on the press reporting on her appearance. After a gripping 42-day trial, the jury of 6 men and 6 women deliberated for a record 5 days before she was found guilty in April 2000 for paying a hitman to murder her husband and for soliciting 3 men to do the same. She received life in prison. 3 years later, Katherine was back in court, trying to get her case overturned. The Court of Criminal Appeal said, however, that it was satisfied there was nothing in the new material that could come to light that could have assisted in Katherine's defense. And so it was dismissed. In 2010, she had another miscarriage of justice appeal dismissed. In 2014, she was denied in her bid to appeal her murder conviction to the Supreme Court. Tom had not made a will, and Katherine and he never had any children, so she was to inherit everything. Tom's mother had effectively frozen Tom's estate, including the proceeds from the sale of the pub. The application of probate by Katherine was still pending on the results of the trial, and when she was found guilty, she lost any claim to the estate. Tom's mother had also initiated legal proceedings to try and have her disinherited. She died a year before Katherine had been convicted of her son's murder, and her case was taken over by her son Patrick and daughter Margaret. They believed they should be allowed to rely on her conviction as part of their legal action, and the Supreme Court agreed. So basically, Katherine got absolutely nothing when she was found guilty. In September 2016, Katherine was admitted to the hospital and was later diagnosed with a terminal brain tumor. She stayed there for 3 days and was granted a reviewable temporary release to receive treatment. On November 7, 2016, she was transferred to an acute post-care unit while undergoing medical treatment. She remained there until August 2017, when she again received an RTR for pre-release and resocialization. She was provided with supportive accommodation and stayed there until she was rehospitalized on November 6, 2017. In December 2017, she was moved to a hospice care facility, where she remained until her death in February 2018. She was 67 years old. Katherine protected her innocence until the end. Despite being convicted of murder by a jury, she insisted that this was not conclusive proof of her guilt. Additionally, she never revealed who had assisted her in killing Tom. The case of Liga Skromane. India is the only country in the world where cultural and religious traditions have not been interrupted since ancient times, which is probably why it attracts tourists from all over the planet. But in our story, we will look at India like a coin that has a different image on each side. On April 20th, 2018, at dawn, 2 young men went fishing down the river toward a mangrove forest. They took a long boat ride downstream until they reached a remote and quiet place. One of them jumped into the water to tie up the boat, but his attention was distracted by a pungent, acrid odor that was very close by. They went ashore and followed the odor. Curiosity led them to a horrifying find. There was something that looked like a human body hanging on a tree branch and a skull lying nearby. The guys abandoned the boat and rushed to the nearest village to report the terrible find. A team of investigators, forensic experts, and police officers urgently arrived on the spot. The experts confirmed that the suspended body was indeed human. It was obvious that it had been hanging for a long time and had already begun to decompose. The flesh on the arms and legs had torn off, and the skull was found nearby. Next to the body were packs of cigarettes, packaged drinking water, and a lighter which probably belonged to the victim. An investigation was conducted at the scene the same morning. The evidence found was seized, and the remains were sent for examination. The modest remnants of clothing that could be identified on the victim revealed that Liga Skromane, a 33-year-old hiker, was the victim of an accident. But who is Liga Skromane, and what happened to her on the riverbank? Liga Skromane was born in Latvia in 1986. She grew up in a large and friendly family, had an older brother, and a younger sister. The sisters were very friendly and from childhood shared all joys and hardships with each other. Growing up, Liga moved to Ireland, but always maintained close relations with her family. It was in Ireland that she met Andrew Jordan. It was not love at first sight, as the modest Liga had difficulty in communicating with new people. But after 5 years, Liga and Andrew turned into a married couple who made great plans for the future. Despite the fact that Liga worked in a hotel and led a modest lifestyle, she dreamed of opening her own center of yogic retreats in Portugal. Andrew supported his beloved's idea, and together, they saved money for 4 years to fulfill their dream. But fate had other plans. In early 2018, Liga was experiencing the effects of an aggravated skin disease that was causing physical and mental discomfort. To help her sister overcome this ailment and restore her emotional state, her sister Ilsa invited Liga on a trip. So in February 2018, Liga and ILS traveled to Tiruvananthapuram, the capital of Kerala, so that Liga could receive Ayurvedic treatment for depression. Kovalam is the premier Ayurvedic resort of Kerala in India. Kovalam, which means grove of coconut palms in Hindi, is a small village offering everything you need for a comfortable and complete rest and treatment. Ayurveda is the oldest system of medical knowledge, which originated more than 5,000 years ago. Ayurveda is based on the universal laws of nature, on the unity of all things in this world. Ayurvedic programs help a person to restore balance and harmony in the body. Panchakarma is the best Ayurvedic program for modern man in Kerala. Panchakarma helps to reboot the body effectively. Most of those who have undergone the Panchakarma course in Kerala repeat it annually, and it is not without reason, as regular Panchakarma not only allows us to get rid of extra pounds, but also adds a couple of decades of healthy life. Since 1985, Ayurveda has been recognized by the World Health Organization as the most effective system of alternative medicine in the world. Let us emphasize that all the promised benefits of Ayurveda are only an alternative, not a panacea for healthy longevity. The 33-year-old Liga and her sister came to Kerala in search of spiritual enlightenment, hoping to be cured of depression in one of the Ayurveda centers. Their treatment tour was scheduled for 6 weeks and included yoga classes, meditation, therapeutic herbal drinks, and nutritional and massage recommendations. The sisters were treated together at an Ayurvedic clinic at Kovalam in Kerala and have already completed their course. On the morning of March 14th, Liga refused to go to yoga class with her sister, explaining that she had a headache. When Isla returned to her room, Liga was not there. With the help of the hotel staff, Liga was able to find out that her sister left the hotel around 11:30 a.m., wearing leggings and a yoga t-shirt, hired an auto rickshaw, and went to Kovalam Beach for a walk. The beaches around Kovalam are popular destinations for both domestic and international travelers. The sandy beaches of Kovalam are always crowded. However, Liga could not be found there. Liga wandered the beach until late at night, showing her sister's picture, but never heard the long-awaited response that someone had seen her. This was actually strange, as Liga was a tall white girl who definitely stood out, and if she was actually on the beach, someone should have seen her. After searching unsuccessfully, Isla went to the police station to report her sister missing. However, the Indian police officers did not show any sympathy for the missing foreign tourist. On the contrary, they complacently asserted that they would surely find the girl who had strayed, or that she would surely return the next day. They were not even deterred by the fact that Liga, according to her sister, had psychological problems and could be an easy target for criminals. The police registered a case, but the investigation started coldly, or rather, it is more correct to say, did not start at all. Liga had traveled extensively in Kerala, visiting Kovalam, Verkala, and finally came to Kovalam. She considered herself a very experienced traveler in India, and this time, she took her sister with her to show her the India she loved so much. But the trip turned tragic. After a few days of inaction by the Indian police, Liga started searching on her own. She enlisted the help of friends and also reported Liga missing to her husband, Andrew, who flew urgently to India. The police investigation intensified after the missing person's husband, Andrew Jordan, and Liga contacted the local press and started an online campaign to find her. Liga also reached out via Twitter to India's Foreign Minister, Sushma Swaraj. Please help. My sister, a Latvian citizen, has been missing for 8 days. We are very worried, she wrote. The desperate sister announced a reward of 100,000 rupees to anyone who could help find Liga or provide any information about her movements that day. Liga and her friend Alexa, who had also traveled to India after hearing about Liga's disappearance, put up posters in the Kovalam beach area where Liga was last seen. Together, they put up flyers and distributed them to people. Numerous locals took an active part in the search for the missing tourist. The important fact remained that Liga suffered from depression and had a hard time interacting with strangers. On the day of her disappearance, she hired an auto rickshaw to reach the beach and was never seen again. She had about 8,000 rupees with her, but no passport, so she could not leave the country. Ashok Kumar, head of the local police station, said that the police had no leads in the case. The police kept saying that the tourist had gone on a bender or eloped and would soon return on her own. However, regular, persistent requests for help from Liga and Andrew forced the police to search for Liga. The search operation was conducted in the Kovalam beach area, where Liga Skani was last seen. Police assumed that she had drowned, just as the unidentified body of a woman was found washed ashore at Kakal, in Kanyakumari district. Investigators examined the body along with the missing woman's sister, but the latter did not identify it as her sister. The version of drowning was not confirmed, and the search for Liga continued. Andrew, on the other hand, was convinced that his wife had been kidnapped by local gangs for the purpose of selling her. He tried to infiltrate these gangs to get more information, but was exposed and warned that repeated contact with the gangs would result in him having to leave the country. A month after Liga went missing, there were still no leads to help find the girl. Liga continued to look for her sister. She visited Kovalam beach every day and watched people. On one such day, she spotted a boat, and she had a theory. The only way to leave the beach unnoticed was by boat. On April 17, 2018, after a forced hiatus, Andrew returned to India to continue his search. Liga and Andrew entered a new struggle to find Liga Skromane, but her body was still not found. The search was complicated by the fact that Liga was a tourist and a citizen of another country. The Latvian Foreign Ministry said the embassy was in constant contact with Liga's relatives and was also working closely with the Indian police. The Latvian embassy also appealed to the Indian Foreign Ministry with a request for special support in the search for Liga, as well as the Honorary Consul of Latvia in India, whose consular district includes the region where Liga disappeared. At the request of the Kerala state government, the Indian Navy and Air Force joined the search for the missing Latvian citizen. The search operation involved NN-32 transport plane, Gemini inflatable boats, underwater sonar, and 5 deep-sea divers. But even this extensive effort did not bring the desired result, and Liga remained missing. The search continued, and by this time, all local residents knew about the missing tourist from Latvia. They supported and sympathized with Andrew and Liga. On April 20, 2018, Liga's phone received the longest-awaited yet most horrific call of her life. A body had been found in the mangrove jungle. She and Andrew drove to the place where waiting for them. For the boat crossing, Liga's heart was pounding like never before. She felt that for the moment, she would have to swim the path that Liga had traveled to her demise. On the spot, horror overwhelmed her. Liga saw her sister's clothes. She recognized the shirt and leggings on the body, but the jacket and shoes did not belong to Liga. It remained unclear how, with whom, and why Liga had gotten to a place that could only be accessed going through Panader from Samudra Beach. 2 women confirmed that they had witnessed Liga traveling alone into the mangrove forest. But why would a girl who was being treated for depression and already alone take a boat to a remote place in the forest? The body was shifted to the Medical College Hospital, where it underwent an autopsy which was captured on video camera. The police said they could not confirm the identity of the body until DNA analysis was completed. According to the city police commissioner, the body was badly mutilated, with the head lying nearby. Police tentatively identified the dead woman as missing tourist Liga Skromane. In favor of the investigators' conclusions is also the fact that Liga's relatives identified the victim by her hair and clothes. One of the versions put forward by rescue services in India was poisoning. There are poisonous pong-pong trees in the mangrove forest, and she could have accidentally or intentionally eaten their fruit and poisoned herself. Between 1989 and 1999, more than 500 people died from poisoning by its fruits in Kerala alone. However, this theory seemed nonsensical because the person was found hanging upside down, but there was no head. It is obvious that if Liga had been poisoned, her body would have been in a completely different position and the head would have been in place. The Indian authorities were talking utter nonsense. Based on the information about Liga's complex psychological problems, the investigators also considered the possibility that Liga had voluntarily taken her own life. Liga feared that the police would try to pass off her sister's murder as a voluntary departure from life. Although a rope had been found at the scene, and it could be concluded that the hiker had hanged herself, Liga demanded a separate explanation for the missing head. "Don't tell me it's lost," Liga said sarcastically in yet another appeal on the internet. Breathlessly, Liga and the anxious public waited for the results of the forensic tests. The forensic results were overwhelming. The report stated that there were areas of blood pooling in part of Liga Skromane brain, as well as bruising in the neck area. The autopsy revealed that the woman had been strangled by several people and was killed in an attempted violent attack. There were external injuries on the body, probably sustained during the struggle. However, the fact of violence could not be definitively confirmed, as the body was in the decomposition stage. There were characteristic injuries on the cartilage in her throat, which indicated that someone had forcefully squeezed her throat. The trauma was severe enough to be fatal, according to forensic experts. There were blood clots in her brain, which confirmed strangulation. They also noted that there were bruises on her neck and legs. A total of 9 wounds were recorded on Liga Skromane's body. In view of the above, the police no longer considered the version of voluntary death. According to the autopsy, it was determined that Liga was murdered after resisting or struggling. Ilse breathed a sigh of relief and hoped that the police would soon find her sister's killers. But there were complications as well. As part of the investigation, the police began checking out local drug dealers and card players. In addition, during interviews with local residents, 2 women said that they saw Liga walking alone to the place where her body was later found. But the police said they did not fully trust their words. Meanwhile, Liga's relatives have accused Indian police of incompetence, claiming that if the girl had been searched for immediately, the tragedy could have been avoided. The 33-year-old Latvian tourist is believed to have been grabbed from a nearby beach and transported by boat before being strangled. A special team of investigators has begun looking for those responsible for the crime. About 40 suspects were interviewed. However, arrests were planned to be made a few days later, after the law enforcers had enough evidence. The Indian police conducted an investigation that led to the arrest of 2 men, who were eventually accused of killing Liga Skromane. Police revealed that Liga Skromane was lured by 2 men, who then abused her before dismembering her body. The alleged assailants, who are now in custody, are local dealers in illegal substances. The suspects fully confessed under torture. Both the accused were pimps and were also dealing in illegal substances, police said. The autopsy did not reveal much evidence, because Liga's body was badly decomposed. Andrew Jordan filed a petition in Superior Courting for a review of the felony murder case. He believed that more people were involved in the woman's murder. In the petition, he pointed out that both defendants later recanted their pleas of guilty to the crime. According to Jordan, the men may have confessed because they were tortured, which, as it turns out, is a common practice in India. However, the Supreme Court of India denied the murdered woman's common-law husband, Andrew Jordan, a review of the case due to lack of direct evidence. The trial was postponed for 2 months, but Andrew was outraged by this attitude of the authorities. He had earlier accused the Carlo authorities and police of incompetence and attempts to cover up Liga's murder, so as not to scare away tourists. Both the suspects' lawyers asked for and got a postponement by law. They have the right to postpone the case once without giving any reason. The more they postponed, the more he was convinced the case was unclean. However, both suspects were in custody. Investigation revealed that 32-year-old Umesh and 28-year-old Ajakumar offered Liga scanny weed. And when she was drugged, they used it and then strangled and decapitated her. It is noted that the two men apprehended for the murder of Liga Skromane had previously committed similar crimes on numerous occasions. Both of them worked for a food delivery company in the Kerala capital and earned money as illegal tour guides in their spare time. Umesh and Ujjan have been charged with destruction of evidence, murder, poisoning, kidnapping, and rape. The place where Liga's corpse was found had earlier served as a pleasure ground for Umesh. He used to take men there. 13 criminal cases have been filed against him, including 6 for sexual assault and 1 for attempted murder. Several of Umesh's victims have testified against him. Liga Skromane, along with both men, was seen in the area by several people. They were initially silent but confessed to everything after the body was found. The detainees confessed to police that they committed the murder while attempting violence. They were apprehended, but had previously claimed that they had only seen Liga Skromane in Kovalam. The men pleaded guilty after repeated interrogations. On December 6, 2022, the court finally sentenced both men to life in prison. The court also recognized that the criminals must pay compensation to Liga Skromane sister, Ilsa, 65,000 rupees each. We would like to note that there has been a whole series of such crimes in this country recently. Young girls are regularly subjected to violence. The problem of crime in India is very acute. Due to the huge number of sexual acts against minors, the government has introduced the death penalty. It is also worth noting that if the relatives, and primarily Liga's sister, had not been persistent, had they not involved the press by organizing a press conference and an influential MP, it is obvious that the local police would hardly have seriously investigated the case. At first, a theory was put forward that Liga had allegedly passed away voluntarily. And as it now turns out, this is not the first incident in this very place where Liga was found. After this story, I would like to warn once again all women who are frivolous about the dangers of traveling alone in India. Do not seek spiritual enlightenment in distant, dangerous, and uncharted countries. Take care of yourself. The case of Lorena Bobbitt. It's said that a humiliated and insulted woman is capable of anything, with the most terrifying in this list being revenge, cruel, ingenious, and sometimes unpredictable. Much in this regard depends on the lady's level of sanity, but one must not overlook the depth of her hurt. This destructive emotion can be carefully hidden within a woman for years, but if it erupts, it will sweep away everything in its path. The story of the Bobbitt spouses in the early 90s shook the world, and their surname became a byword, spawning the verb to bobbit, which means to cut or to chop. This case drew heightened public attention, not just to the issues of domestic violence, but also to such a delicate subject as marital assault, which many try to sidestep. Lorena Leonore Bobbitt was born on May 15, 1970 in the town of Bucale, located in eastern Ecuador near the province of Chimborazo. She was the youngest child in a simple and very modest family. When she was in elementary school, her family moved to Venezuela and settled in Caracas. Lorena grew up quite clever. She performed well in school, was diligent and goal-oriented. In her teenage years, she lost her father, and her relationship with her mother, Elvia Gallo, was quite strained. As soon as she graduated from school, she decided to move to the United States to live with her cousin, Jana Baisudi. Her relative gladly took her in and helped her with the paperwork for a student visa. However, she was a very conservative woman. So Lorena, living in her house, had to abide by a strict set of rules, just like Jana's own children, and also take on some of the household duties. Despite everything, the young woman decided to stay in the US as she realized that it offered her far more opportunities than Latin America. She had long been attracted to the beauty industry, so Gallo decided to train as a manicurist. Moreover, Basutti owned her own beauty salon located in the city center, had extensive experience in the field, and was eager to help her niece learn the profession by allowing her to observe the work of the specialists and practice on her own. Later, her aunt arranged for her to work part-time in her salon. About 8 months after she moved to the new country, the young woman had settled in, enrolled in college, and was working as a manicurist in her relative's salon while gradually saving money. In September 1988, Lorena was preparing to go to a party with several of her friends. Her aunt gave her strict instructions on how to behave and what time she needed to be home, and she promised that everything would be fine. The modest young beauty was nervous as it was her first time preparing to go to a nightlife establishment late at night. She chose a relatively modest outfit, unlike her friends, applied makeup, and styled her hair fashionably. Upon arriving at the nightclub, she was struck by the carefree and festive atmosphere. Inside, the venue was filled with young people dancing, having fun, and socializing. And Lorena couldn't help but think that such a place might be where she could meet the man of her dreams. This thought proved to be prophetic. A few minutes later, she noticed a very attractive young man intently looking at her and smiling. He waved at her and she waved back. Then the young man approached her and introduced himself. He was John Bobbitt, and he could not take his eyes off the young beauty with the quite exotic appearance. The guy was handsome, tall, and charismatic. He cracked jokes and skillfully paid compliments, so she couldn't resist his charm. They spent the evening dancing and chatting, and afterwards, the new acquaintance walked Lorena to her aunt's home. As they said goodbye, he asked for her home phone number and promised to call soon. John Wayne Bobbitt was born on March 24, 1967, in Buffalo in the northwestern part of New York State. He was the youngest of 3 children in his family. At the age of 3, the boy lost his father, who tragically died, and his mother, unable to cope with the shock, ended up in a psychiatric clinic after a serious nervous breakdown. All 3 children were taken into the care of their religious aunt and uncle, who wanted to help their relatives in this difficult situation. The boy was still very young at the time, but the events that occurred undoubtedly left a mark on his life. The aunt and uncle raised the children with strictness in accordance with religious canons. They all attended church every Sunday and engaged in charity work, trying to help those around them. John was not an outstanding student, but overall he did fairly well in school. As a teenager, he decided to pursue a future in military service. After undergoing the necessary training and special preparation at a military academy, the young man joined the ranks of the Marines, where he proved himself as a brave, disciplined, and determined young man. However, after a few years, the strict regime and the need to obey in the army began to weigh on him. After leaving the service with some military experience and skills, he was hired as a security guard at one of the city's popular establishments. But he later changed jobs frequently, not staying long at any. The day after they met, John, as promised, called Lorena to ask her out on a date. The young couple simply walked through the park, engaging in easy conversation about various topics. And John made it clear that he wanted to continue their relationship. Lorraine was not opposed to this, but according to the rules set by her aunt, she had to introduce her boyfriend to her before they could start a serious relationship. John accepted all the conditions, and on the appointed day, he came to dinner at the home of his beloved's relative. Bobbitt was very sweet, courteous, and considerate, yet he made an effort to appear serious. He managed to make a good impression on the strict Jana, and after a serious one-on-one conversation with the young man, the woman allowed her niece to continue seeing John. 6 months after the start of their romantic relationship, the suitor proposed to Lorena, and she accepted. She was overjoyed, having always dreamed of a family, children, and a home of her own. The couple began preparing for the most important event of their lives, and in June 1989, shortly after Gallo turned 19, they made their union official. The wedding celebration was quite modest, as the young couple did not have the money for a lavish ceremony, and they chose to spend their savings on a honeymoon by the warm ocean coast. They were happy, but the only shadow over the celebration was the absence of the bride and groom's parents. Instead, their aunts and uncles came to share the joyous moment with them. After the wedding and a delightful honeymoon, the couple moved to Virginia and settled in a quiet and cozy area of the city called Manassas. The first few months of their life together were like a real fairy tale. They enjoyed each other's company, showing mutual tenderness, care, and love. But as the new year of 1990 approached, the situation began to change for the worse. At first, Lorena tried not to pay much attention to some of her young husband's remarks and rudeness, thinking it was just a so-called adjustment period. But one day, when she served cold soup for dinner, her husband simply threw the plate on the floor and then started yelling at his wife, insulting her and calling her a terrible homemaker. She tried to argue, pointing out that John Wine, he closely monitored where she went and who she spoke to. At home, she had to follow the rules he set, and intimacy between them occurred only when John wanted it, regardless of Lena's wishes. The poor girl couldn't share her problems with anyone as she found the situation shameful and humiliating. On June 22, 1993, John, along with his longtime military buddy, decided to go out to an entertainment venue. The men partied and drank until late at night while Lorena was at home alone. She did not wait up for her husband and went to the bedroom around midnight, soon falling asleep. Around 3 in the morning, a drunk and aroused John returned home. He didn't waste any time and ripped the shirt off his sleeping wife. Lorena hardly understood what was happening when her husband forcefully took advantage of her. She begged him to stop and not to do this, crying, but he was completely indifferent to her pleas and tears. After it was over, John simply collapsed next to her and fell asleep. Lorena, trembling and sobbing, made her way to the kitchen. She poured herself some water and took a few sips to calm down. But then her gaze fell on a stand with large, sharp kitchen knives. Her hand reached out on its own and pulled out a carving knife. Out of her mind, she went back to the bedroom, where her husband lay on his back, snoring drunkenly. She grabbed his genitalia with her left hand, squeezed hard, and sharply cut through with the knife, severing a large part of it. John jumped up, screaming in agony, while Lorena simply walked out of the room, went to the garage, and got into her car, speeding away through the deserted nighttime streets of the city. She only came to her senses at an intersection when she saw a red light at the traffic signal. At that moment, she looked at her blood-stained hands and realized that she was still holding the severed part of John's body in her left hand. She rolled down the window and threw the detested piece of flesh out, then continued driving. Lorena headed to the home of a close friend who was stunned by her nighttime visit and the state she was in. After Lorena told her what had happened, her friend, realizing the gravity of the situation, called the police herself and summoned a medical team to the house where the injured Bobbitt was. Precision surgery was required. Throughout this ordeal, John was desperately trying to stop the bleeding by pressing a sheet against his wound. Notably, the groin vein is a major vessel, and its injury nearly always results in death from blood loss. However, John was somewhat fortunate, if one could say that, because a clot had formed, significantly slowing the blood loss. The responding medics arrived in time to transport him to the nearest hospital, where he received immediate medical attention. The question then arose about the whereabouts of the severed part of his genitalia, as it was still possible to reattach it to its original place with restoration of its initial physiological functions. Lorena indicated the approximate area of the road where she had discarded her husband's anatomical fragment, and after an extensive search, the police were able to find it. The amputated organ was cleansed with antiseptic, then placed in a special container with medical ice, and urgently transported to the hospital where the injured party was already being treated. The surgeon who arrived from the state capital was astounded by the complexity of the situation, as he had never encountered such a case before. But he proceeded with the operation anyway. He performed a unique surgery for that time, which lasted more than 9 hours and was more than successful. Despite the traumatic amputation of the organ and the fact that it had lain on the road for over an hour, all tissues and vessels were successfully reattached, and the patient quickly began to recover. Public outcry ensued. That same night, Lorena was arrested and taken to the police station for questioning, as well as to clarify all the circumstances and motives of her actions. She immediately confessed to everything and shared her harrowing story that had driven her to such a desperate act. She recounted how 4 years of marriage had turned into a real nightmare for her, with her husband regularly abusing her, both emotionally and physically, and forcing intimacy only when he desired. Mrs. Bobbitt also mentioned how, about a year ago, her husband had forced her to terminate a pregnancy despite her deep desire to have a child, and that abortion had been a traumatizing event for her. Regarding the incident itself, she said she remembered very little of that night and had acted as if she were in a fog. Lorena recounted how her husband had come home drunk and simply taken advantage of her. And although she tried to resist, he ignored her. After the incident, she went to the kitchen for water, and the next thing she remembered was her husband's scream, the roar of the car engine, and the part of his genitalia that she was clutching in her hand as she sat behind the wheel. The case caused a significant stir in the press and was actively covered by the media. Many women like Lorena, who had suffered from domestic violence, as well as feminist organizations which were gaining strength and popularity at the time, rallied to her side. In the early 90s, wives who were subjected to emotional and physical abuse by their husbands typically remained silent about their plight. Society was still inclined to blame the victims themselves, suggesting that they provoked conflicts or behaved improperly. It was assumed that a wife should be submissive and obey her husband in everything. And if the husband was dissatisfied and resorted to violence, it was considered the wife's fault. It was her fault. Intimacy in marriage was considered a duty of the wife, not open to discussion. On the other hand, almost all men sided with John. Many feared that Lorena's act might prove contagious, prompting other women suffering from physical and intimate violence in marriage to also take up knives. According to official statistics, there were several million such women in the country at that time. Trials and sentences of the spouses. 2 parallel court cases began almost simultaneously. Lorena officially charged her husband only with taking advantage of her on that fateful night. Although in court, she detailed the years of regular abuse and beatings, emotional violence and humiliations she endured, as well as the abortion she was forced to undergo against her will, under her husband's coercion. John's testimony was confused. He denied all allegations against him, but much of what Lorena said was corroborated by facts. For instance, it was confirmed that he did not have steady employment or a stable source of income, yet he loved spending time in entertainment venues, often forcibly or deceitfully taking money from his wife to do so. Additionally, Lorena's friends confirmed that they had repeatedly seen bruises and scrapes on her body, and she had been in a depressed state for a long time, though she tried not to complain. The court concluded that the husband had indeed abused his wife both emotionally and physically throughout their marriage, driving her to desperation. However, regarding the charge of intimate violence that occurred on the night of June 23, 1993, there was not enough evidence, and thus John was acquitted. He presented several versions of what happened that evening, and the jury, composed of 9 women and 3 men, found him not guilty. In the fall of that year, Lorena's trial began in September 1993. She was charged with inflicting severe bodily harm on her spouse. Her lawyers argued that she acted while suffering from PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, caused by the ongoing emotional and physical abuse from her husband. A psychiatric evaluation was ordered, which confirmed that she acted in a state of distress, unaware of her actions, and therefore could not be held responsible for what she had done. In early January of the following year, after nearly 8 hours of deliberation, the jury decided that Lorena could not be held criminally responsible for her actions, as she was in a state of insanity at the time of the offense. However, she was required to undergo a 6-week treatment program at a specialized clinic, after which she was able to return to her previous life. The spouses officially divorced only in 1995, after which Lorena reverted to her maiden name. What became of John later? John remained indignant for a long time that his wife faced no punishment for her actions. He decided to fully capitalize on his sudden notoriety, aiming to extract as much money as possible from such scandalous fame. John founded his own music band called Severed Parts, but the group was short-lived as it failed to garner any public interest. When offered a substantial fee to star in adult films in the late 90s, he did not hesitate to accept. Thus, he appeared in explicit films titled Frankenpenis, a play on Frankenstein, and John Wayne Bobbitt Uncut. John acted in several more films of a similar genre, but interest in him and his reattached organ quickly waned. For a long time, John was eager to appear on various talk shows and gave interviews extensively. But over the years, such offers became less frequent, and the story gradually faded from memory. John then found work as a bartender in an entertainment venue in Las Vegas. And by his 50s, he was struggling to make ends meet by taking jobs as a mover, driver, and pizza delivery man. In 1999, he received a suspended sentence for theft. Regarding his personal life, during the high-profile court case that the entire country followed, journalists discovered that Bobbitt had an illegitimate son named Andrew, born in 1992 to one of his lovers, Beatrice Williams. In 1994, John was brought to trial for assaulting his new girlfriend, Christina Elliott, who worked as a dancer in a nightclub. He spent 15 days in jail for this and received probation. In the early 2000s, John was arrested 3 times for assaulting his then-wife, Joanna Farrell. This time, he was imprisoned for a year for violating his probation. They officially divorced in February 2004. What happened to Lorena? Unlike her former husband, Lorena did not take pride in her scandalous notoriety and tried to stay out of the limelight. In 1996, she decided to return to her native Ecuador, where her mother, Elia, was living at the time. However, just 6 months later, Lorena made the news again when her mother accused her of assault. The conflict was resolved without going to court, and the women continued to live together. A year later, Lorena returned to the USA, where she opened her own small beauty salon in Washington. In February 2007, she founded a foundation called Lena's Red Wagon, which focused on helping women who had suffered from domestic violence. Soon after, Lorena agreed to give an interview for the first time in a long time and appeared on CBS News Morning Show, where she discussed her life post-incident. She also appeared on the popular Oprah Winfrey talk show in the mid-2000s. Lorena remarried, and her new husband was a man named Dave Bellinger, with whom she had a daughter in February 2006. She preferred not to recall her marriage to Bob at all and claimed she did not follow his life after their divorce. In February 2009, nearly 15 years after their sensational legal battles had ended, the former spouses met face-to-face for the first time on the show, Insider. John apologized to Lorena for the way he had treated her during their marriage and declared that he still loved her despite everything. Lorena was visibly moved by his words and confirmed that every year on Valentine's Day, her ex-husband still sends her flowers and cards. The case of Roxanna Valdez. Roxanna Valdez was born in 1957 in a small village in the province of Punta Arenas, Chile. Roxanna married a man whose name is not publicly known, and they had a son together. However, the marriage was not successful, and they separated in February 2011. As a single mother, Roxanna faced significant challenges in her small village, where job opportunities were limited. The community's main occupation was farming and selling produce, and the local schools focused on teaching agricultural skills. Roxanna worked at the Don Gregorio boarding school, which trained students to become agricultural technicians. Her role was a night supervisor, responsible for ensuring the students' behavior and slept at night. She did not have a direct role in raising the children. Roxanna's son attended the same boarding school, as she was unable to care for him during the day due to her work in the fields. At the boarding school where Roxanna worked, Claudio Munoz Ramirez was the head of grounds maintenance. His nighttime work schedule led to him meeting Roxanna. Despite their 14-year age difference, they discovered they had a lot to talk about. Roxanna would often spend entire nights discussing school issues and her failed marriage with Claudio. They also shared commonalities in their personal lives. Claudio had 2 daughters he loved, but he felt disconnected from their mother and had considered divorce multiple times. However, he stayed in the marriage because of a promise he made to her late father. Over time, Claudio seemed to forget his promise and began spending more time with Roxanna, away from his family. Eventually, he made a decisive move without explaining himself to his wife. He packed his belongings and left their home to be with Roxanna, who happily welcomed him into her life. Their relationship moved forward quickly, but Roxanna overlooked some important red flags. She welcomed a man she barely knew into her home, despite having children who needed her attention. As they had enjoyable conversations, Roxanna failed to notice that Claudio had a temper and could be cruel. The first major incident occurred at the boarding school, where Claudio was in charge of cleanliness. During a scheduled cleanup day, some students refused to participate, which infuriated Claudio. He threatened to beat anyone who didn't help, despite having no teaching experience. Although it's unclear if he would have followed through on this threat, the students eventually started cleaning. Later, they collectively complained to the principal about Claudio's threats of physical violence. The principal, unhappy with Claudio, asked him to resign voluntarily. This was a significant setback, as the Don Gregorio boarding school was one of the few places in the area that offered stable and decent-paying jobs. After searching for work in fields and at fruit bases, Claudio realized it was a futile effort. He and Roxanna decided to look for a better life elsewhere, but they left their son at the boarding school so he could continue his education. They didn't want to take any risks by bringing him along. To avoid relying on employers who had already let them down, Claudio and Roxanna decided to start their own small business, a fruit kiosk. They moved to Molina, a commune a couple of hours from the Chilean capital, known for its vineyards and wine exports. Roxanna and Claudio bought a kiosk near their new home, found suppliers for vegetables and fruits, and started their small family business. Claudio took care of purchasing and transporting products, while Roxanna handled sales throughout the day. They couldn't afford to hire an employee, as it would add to their expenses, and they worried that someone else might not take care of the perishable goods properly. Claudio became visibly upset and angry when he discovered Roxanna was pregnant with their first child. This was a moment that required serious thought, but Roxanna, caught up in their new relationship and thriving business, agreed with Claudio's suggestion to give the baby to her relatives to raise after birth. However, Roxanna suffered a miscarriage afterwards. Following this, Claudio's behavior changed significantly. He frequently yelled at Roxanna and occasionally turned violent. Neighbors, tired of the constant noise, often called the Chilean police, the Carabineros, to intervene in their domestic disputes. One time, when the Carabineros responded to a call, they found Roxanna in tears and partially undressed, fleeing the house with Claudio chasing after her. Roxanna revealed to the officers that she was suffering from ongoing domestic abuse, which had caused her miscarriage. The incident left her needing psychological support. However, as time went by, they seemed to put their issues behind them and continued living together as if nothing had happened. After the incident, Claudio should have faced charges, but Roxanna chose to forgive him and give him another chance. She made him promise that it wouldn't happen again. Although Claudio promised to change, his past behavior with his ex-wife suggested that his words might not be reliable. Sadly, the past repeated itself. Claudio stopped physically abusing Roxanna, but he started going out to local bars at night, drinking heavily and spending a lot of their family's money on alcohol and encounters with women. Roxanna put up with her husband's behavior, hoping that he would settle down once they had a child. In a way, she was correct. After Roxanna gave birth to a healthy child in February 2013, Claudio changed his ways. He stopped going out and focused on their business, which was growing and needed more attention. They expanded their business by buying another kiosk and vehicle for transporting products. Roxanna also invested in firearms for protection, as they lived and worked in areas that weren't very safe. The family's assets appeared to increase substantially, but this growth was only theoretical. In reality, Claudio resumed his previous habits, wasting money on alcohol and reverting to violent behavior towards Roxanna. Roxanna's account detailed how the abuse in their relationship escalated. At first, Claudio drank sporadically, but the frequency soon increased. When inebriated, he would return home, accuse Roxanna of fictional affairs, and subject her to physical and sexual abuse. His actions seemed intentionally hurtful, even when Roxanna was pregnant. This culminated in a miscarriage in August 2012, sending Roxanna into a prolonged depression. On one occasion, following his typical routine, Claudio went to a local bar and didn't come back until the next morning. Roxanna, accustomed to his behavior, still felt anxious about him. It was later discovered that Claudio had taken 5 million Chilean pesos, equivalent to around $6,000, which Roxana had obtained from selling her mother's house. He spent this money on alcohol and visits to brothels. Roxana was shocked and felt betrayed when she discovered that Claudio had taken the money meant for their shared business, which was hidden in their daughter's room. When Claudio came home late that evening, Roxana confronted him about the missing money. However, Claudio was uninterested in discussing the issue and instead hit Roxana, admitting that he had squandered all the money. This incident was the final straw for Roxana. Without saying a word, she went to their bedroom, retrieved a revolver that was meant for protection against local criminals, and shot Claudio in the chest. Claudio died instantly. Roxana was surprised by her own drastic action and attempted to stop the bleeding from the gunshot wound. But it was too late. The close-range shot from the .38 caliber revolver was fatal. In her testimony, Roxana expressed deep remorse and acknowledged the immorality of her actions. She confessed that when she retrieved the revolver, her intention was not to intimidate Claudio but to kill him. Roxana remembered the numerous times Claudio abused and assaulted her and how she failed to report him to the authorities due to fear. She was afraid of being alone, especially after they had a child together. After shooting Claudio, Roxana's main concern was how it would affect their daughter if she were imprisoned and the child was sent to an institution. That night, Roxana decided to get rid of the body and report Claudio missing. She knew the police were aware of his frequent disappearances during drinking binges. As a delicate woman, disposing of the body was a daunting task. She decided to remove it piece by piece, using kitchen knives to cut the limbs and head. The process required 5 knives, as they kept becoming dull. Roxana then boiled the dismembered parts in large pots, all while playing with her young daughter, who was unaware of what her mother was doing and what had happened to her father. Roxana's calculated approach to disposing of the body while trying to maintain a sense of normalcy for her daughter shows the complexity and desperation of her situation. The day after cooking and cooling the body parts, Roxana packed them into separate plastic containers labeled by body part, hands, legs, head, and torso, and then placed each container into a garbage bag. She loaded the bags into her car and drove to St. Lucia to scatter them on a vacant lot. Before leaving, she cleaned her house thoroughly with bleach. However, upon arriving in St. Lucia, Roxana couldn't bring herself to dispose of the bags, despite finding a suitable location. Roxana was nervous during the drive, constantly feeling like she was being watched and fearing that the police would stop and search her car. This fear escalated into panic, prompting her to devise a backup plan involving her daughter, where she would pretend to rush her to the hospital if stopped by police. She even considered pinching her daughter to make her cry louder and make the situation more believable. Since Roxana couldn't discard the remains, she returned home and hid the bags in the garage. She then cleaned the interior of her car with bleach again and visited Claudio's relatives. She told the police that Claudio had stolen a large sum of money and hadn't been home for days, but they simply shrugged off her claims. Roxana visited her mother and brother, who were alarmed by her condition. She wasn't eating, had a glazed expression, and kept asking the same questions. The only question she answered clearly was about Claudio's absence, claiming he was delayed due to a flat tire while buying goods for their store. Overwhelmed by her thoughts and the hidden evidence, Roxana broke down and asked her brother for help. When he arrived, she revealed everything and showed him the containers. Her brother was shocked. Roxana wanted to unburden herself and share the traumatic experiences she had with Claudio, but she primarily needed her brother's help to dispose of the containers holding the body. However, her brother refused, fearing he would be implicated as an accomplice and face police involvement. He urged Roxana to confess to the Chilean police, the Carabineros, and threatened to do it himself if she didn't. Disappointed but with no alternative, Roxana decided to cooperate. That night, she went to the 4th police station to make a significant statement. The officers, who knew her, initially assumed she was there to report her problematic husband. However, they were stunned by what she revealed. Roxana was arrested on the spot. News of her arrest spread quickly, drawing numerous journalists to the station. As the journalists waited, Roxanna was eventually brought out, visibly distressed and in handcuffs. Before being escorted into a police car, she exclaimed, "I was afraid he would kill me one day." At first glance, the case seemed straightforward. Roxanna had confessed, provided evidence, and surrendered voluntarily. Nevertheless, Prosecutor Monica Bisos was skeptical of Roxanna's easy confession and wanted a more thorough investigation. Prosecutor Bisos asked to extend Roxanna's arrest to allow for further forensic examination. The goal was to determine if Claudio was still alive when his body was dismembered, which would have led to a longer sentence for Roxanna. The judge agreed to a 60-day detention to continue the investigation. At the same time, Roxanna's lawyer, Carolina Gutierrez, argued that Roxanna committed the crime under extreme emotional distress. This could have been made worse by postpartum depression and the domestic abuse she suffered. Gutierrez highlighted Roxanna's cooperation with the authorities and her voluntary confession as reasons for a more lenient sentence. However, forensic results later showed that Claudio died from a gunshot wound to the chest, disproving the prosecution's theory that he was alive during dismemberment. As a result, the factors that would have increased Roxanna's sentence were dismissed. Another lawyer, Juan Pablo Cardenas, pointed out that the gun used in the murder was registered. He also noted that Roxanna first reported domestic violence to the police just 20 days after they moved in together. Psychologist Rodrigo Valenzuela conducted a medical examination and presented documents to the court showing that Roxanna was severely mentally unstable when the crime occurred. This instability, linked to the loss of 2 children, meant she wasn't fully aware of her actions. Additionally, forensic results revealed that Claudio had a high blood alcohol level at the time of his death on April 1735. Roxanna's trial began after a year of investigations and evidence gathering. During the trial, Roxanna refused to make statements due to her distress over the media portrayal. Prosecutors emphasized the severity of the crime, but couldn't prove premeditation. The defense argued that Roxanna acted in self-defense against a man who had brutally mistreated her for years. The court hearing in Chile lasted several weeks, captivating the entire nation. Prosecutor Monica sought a 15-year prison term for Roxanna, the accused. After considering the defense and the jury's input, the judges sentenced Roxanna to 6 years in a correctional facility with a relatively lenient regime. Claudio's family, who had hoped for a life sentence or even the death penalty for Roxanna, were outraged by the court's decision. They had already been upset when the prosecutor requested a 15-year sentence, which they felt was too lenient. The family attempted to downplay any history of domestic violence and claimed that Claudio, a financially independent businessman, would not have stolen $6,000 from Roxanna. Additionally, they alleged that Claudio had confided in them about Roxanna's threatening behavior, stating that she would often retrieve a revolver from the closet and threaten to kill him. In a press interview, Claudio's sister shifted the blame to the Chilean state, arguing that the country's judicial system is corrupt and fails to deliver justice, as evidenced by the relatively short sentence given to Roxanna, which she compared to punishments for minor thefts. Giselle, Claudio's first wife, spoke out in his defense. She stated that Claudio was never violent during their many years together. In contrast, Roxanna frequently started arguments due to her jealousy and possessiveness. Roxanna was initially imprisoned, but after serving 2/3 of her sentence, she was transferred to a semi-open education center in Tala for good behavior. She was allowed to stay in contact with her daughter and was eventually released early. The media reignited public interest in the case, and many people were outraged by her early release. However, some individuals, despite viewing Roxanna as a murderer, believed her actions were justified because they saw her as a victim. The debate surrounding this case continues to this day. This story emphasizes the severe consequences that can occur when domestic violence is not addressed promptly. The case of Carrie Farver. Carrie Farver was born on November 30th, 1974, in Macedonia, Nebraska, USA. As a single mother, she raised her son, Max Maxwell, after experiencing failed relationships in the past. Raising Max was challenging for Carrie. Despite her immense love for her child, she struggled with depression, which led to a period where she spent a month in bed. During this time, her mother, Nancy Rainey, took care of Max. Carrie's difficult relationship with Max's father and unstable living conditions contributed to her mental health issues. At the age of 20, Carrie's struggles led to a diagnosis of bipolar disorder. This condition causes extreme mood swings, ranging from euphoria, increased productivity, and excessive friendliness to depression, bitterness, and feelings of powerlessness. Although bipolar disorder significantly complicates daily life, Carrie's doctor found an effective treatment for her in the early 2000s. With this treatment, Carrie was able to manage her condition and live a relatively normal life. Whether Carrie wanted to settle her personal life is an open question. On one hand, what woman doesn't dream of a suitable partner? On the other hand, why commit to someone who might bring worries and misfortunes? Carrie was raised in a loving family and had an active lifestyle. She played sports and aspired to become a doctor. However, her dreams were cut short during her first medical practice when she fainted at the sight of blood. Deciding not to risk her health or her patients, she pursued a career in programming instead. In February, Carrie received a job offer in Omaha with good prospects and decided to take it. However, her son Max was in middle school and preferred to stay in his familiar surroundings, so he remained with his grandmother in Macedonia. According to Amy, a friend of Carrie's father, Carrie had a radiant smile that drew attention whenever she entered a room. It was likely this quality that caught Dave Kroppa's eye when they met at an auto repair shop in November 2012. As Carrie showed him something inside her car, a Ford Explorer, Dave felt an instant attraction. Their first date arrived soon after, but their time together was interrupted by numerous calls and messages from a woman named Liz, who eventually stopped by Dave's apartment to collect something she had left there earlier. Dave told Carrie about his past relationship with Liz, whom he met on a dating site 6 months prior. They had been together for a while, but he ended things because she was extremely clingy. Carrie was understanding and wasn't fazed by Liz's presence in Dave's apartment, recognizing that everyone has past relationships that can resurface. 2 weeks after moving in, Carrie started dating Dave. They had discussed their expectations beforehand and agreed to a brief, casual affair. Liz, whose full name is Shaunana Elizabeth Gallier, was the first person Dave met online in February 2012. Dave and Liz had children around the same age. However, Dave felt Liz wasn't a suitable long-term partner due to her limited education and lack of shared interests. Their relationship focused more on physical intimacy than meaningful conversations. Over time, Liz grew increasingly interested in what Dave was doing when she wasn't around, particularly in regards to who he was seeing. However, Dave consistently reminded her that they were in an open relationship, implying that she shouldn't be concerned about his interactions with others. He also reassured her that she had the freedom to date other men if she chose to do so. Despite Dave's openness, Liz couldn't shake off her feelings of dissatisfaction and jealousy, particularly towards Dave's children and their mother, Amy. She struggled to understand the close bond that persisted between Dave and Amy even after their breakup. As a result, Liz's behavior became increasingly possessive, prompting Dave to create distance between them. It was during this period of separation that Carrie entered Dave's life. Carrie was not only beautiful but also stylish, intelligent, and a great conversationalist. Dave found himself lost in conversation with her for hours, feeling an undeniable connection as they shared common interests and perspectives. Liz noticed that Dave was becoming increasingly distant, so she tried to rekindle their connection by sending messages, emails, and making phone calls. However, he had no intention of stopping his interactions with Carrie or anyone else for her sake. Meanwhile, Carrie and Dave were spending more nights together, which was convenient for Carrie's work schedule and enjoyable for Dave. Carrie seemed to be taking things lightly, focusing on having fun and not looking for anything serious. In December 2015, Liz was shot and non-fatally wounded, leading her to suspect who might be responsible and realize she needed to take action. 2 years prior, on November 13, 2012, Carrie had kissed Dave goodbye before he left for work, expecting to see him later. However, that would be the last time they saw each other. At 9:45 a.m. that morning, Dave received a surprising text message from Carrie stating she wanted to move in with him permanently. Dave found this message disconcerting as they had previously discussed and agreed not to rush into a relationship, being happy with their current situation. Dave replied that he wasn't ready for such a change, but Carrie's response was unpleasant and filled with profanity. He was shocked to discover that all of Carrie's belongings were gone from the apartment. This led him to believe she had left him for good. That same day, Carrie also removed him as a friend on Facebook, which seemed like the end of the matter. However, Dave started getting multiple rude texts and emails from Carrie daily, containing curses and threats to ruin his life. Carrie sent a large number of these messages, all of which were aggressive. Uncharacteristically, she also stopped showing up for work despite being known for her punctuality. Strange messages weren't only sent to Dave, but also to her mother and 15-year-old son, Max. She claimed to have found a job in Kansas and planned to take Max with her, but wanted to be alone for the time being due to worries over her failed romance. In May 2013, Carrie posted on Facebook that she'd left of her own free will and was tired of criticism. She wasn't missing her old life, but wasn't ready to return home. Carrie asserted her independence as a grown woman, stating that she had the right to leave home if she chose to. She apologized for hurting everyone by leaving abruptly. However, as time passed, Carrie failed to reappear. Her mother became increasingly concerned when Carrie missed important family events, including her own birthday, Max's birthday, and other celebrations. The final indication that something was seriously wrong was when Carrie missed her father's funeral. Liz began receiving messages from Carrie, which were insulting, humiliating, and even threatening. Carrie warned Liz to stay away from Dave. Confused by Carrie's behavior, Liz reached out to Dave, who revealed he was facing a similar situation. Carrie was sending him messages and emails, accusing him of wrongdoing, calling him a liar, and vowing revenge for the pain he allegedly caused her. The messages were sometimes ominous, with Carrie claiming to know what Dave was doing at the moment. The shared experience brought Dave and Liz closer together, but also made Dave feel guiltier about the trouble he had caused. The messages from Carrie grew more menacing and were filled with grammatical errors and illogical content. This was unusual, as Carrie's mother claimed that her daughter had always been a calm person who wrote coherent and well-structured letters and documents. Carrie was known to be meticulous about spelling and writing style. It's possible that she had experienced even more severe mental health issues. Her actions seemed to be driven solely by her uncontrolled mental state. A key indicator of dissociative identity disorder, also known as split personality, is the presence of separate, simultaneous self-consciousness in each ego, each with its own distinct memories, thoughts, behaviors, and inclinations towards specific actions. This might explain Carrie's unusual behavior and altered writing style. Everything suggested she was unstable, which is why the police didn't initially consider her missing, instead focusing on stopping the pursuit of Liz and Dave. They tried to track Carrie's cell phone, but it was unsuccessful due to blocked signals. Meanwhile, Liz and Dave continued to receive hundreds of texts and emails, sometimes simultaneously receiving nasty messages when they were together. Dave and Liz continued dating, but he felt uneasy around her as she became increasingly demanding. Despite claiming to be fine with their no-commitment relationship, Liz's behavior suggested otherwise. Every time Dave tried to end things with Liz, Carrie would start texting him, bonding with him over their shared victimization. This common ground drew Dave and Carrie closer together, causing them to reunite repeatedly. In January 2013, a missing car was surprisingly found in Dave's front yard. However, the fingerprints on the steering wheel didn't match Carrie's, and the car showed no suspicious signs. The police eventually returned the car to Carrie's parents. Carrie continued to message Liz and Dave, escalating her behavior by sending pictures of their children and threatening to harm them unless Dave left Liz alone. As time passed, Carrie's stalking persisted, and Liz's jealousy grew, frustrating Dave. He became exhausted with the events unfolding in his life and eventually found the strength to end his relationship with Liz. This decision came shortly after a tragic incident in August 2013, when Liz reported a fire at her home that resulted in the death of all her pets, including a snake, a cat, and 2 dogs. Liz suspected Carrie was responsible, citing threats made via texts and emails. The incident marked a significant turning point in the case of missing person Carrie Farver, leading to Carrie's placement on a federal wanted list. Tens of thousands of messages were meticulously analyzed. Law enforcement seized cell phones from Dave and Liz, as they believed Dave was also in danger. Someone had vandalized the auto repair shop where he worked and thrown a brick through his window. It appeared that Carrie's anger was directed at anyone in Dave's life. Consequently, Amy Flora, Fave's ex-wife, began receiving threatening messages from Carrie. As Dave spent time with his children, he also saw Amy regularly. The police were perplexed as to why Carrie, who had dated Dave for less than 2 weeks, was now stalking Dave and his ex-wife. The investigators decided to focus on Dave Kupa, as Carrie's disappearance raised many questions that needed to be answered. It was a mystery that didn't add up. Carrie Farver's family was also tirelessly searching for her, exploring every possible lead to find her. Their efforts finally paid off in the spring of 2015, when detectives Ryan Avis and Jim Doty took on the case. Unfortunately, they found no evidence that Carrie was still alive. One of the detectives shared their thoughts with ABC News. "It's unusual for adults to suddenly leave without using any money. No one saw or heard from her, which doesn't make sense. She had a good income and a nice home. I've come to believe that I have no proof she's alive." With the help of a digital forensics expert, the detectives analyzed data from Croppa and Gore's phones from 2013. Kawa discovered that Carrie had sent over 50,000 texts and 15,000 emails to Dave in just 3 years. Whoever was impersonating Carrie became increasingly sophisticated, trying to hide their IP address and true identity. Somebody with expertise in computer programs seemed to be behind the strange occurrences. In December 2015, Liz Garr contacted the police again, this time reporting that she had been shot in the leg on her own doorstep. She claimed her attacker was Amy Flora, not Carrie. Coincidentally, Dave was missing a gun that Amy may have had access to. This new development raised suspicions that Amy might be involved in Carrie's disappearance. The investigation uncovered a lead that suggested Amy's motive. She may have been seeking revenge against women connected to Dave Krupp. Amy's relationship with Dave had been complicated, and the presence of other women in his life might have prevented them from reuniting. The police promptly questioned Amy, but surprisingly, she had a solid alibi. Multiple witnesses confirmed that she was not at Liz's house when the shooting occurred, so no arrest was made. The investigation became increasingly puzzling. New details emerged from the analysis of Liz's cell phone data. Investigators found fake email addresses using variations of Farver's name and an app used to schedule messages. This discovery shed light on how Liz and Dave received simultaneous messages from Carrie. The investigation led to suspicion of Liz Gallier, which intensified when her fingerprint matched those on Carrie's car steering wheel. It was now clear who the culprit was, and the priority was to prevent further harm. To catch Liz off guard, detectives devised a plan to create a fake narrative, pretending to still consider Amy the prime suspect, aiming to prevent Liz from escaping or destroying evidence. Liz fell for the trap. She was thrilled at the opportunity to eliminate another rival who was threatening her relationship with Dave. Soon after, Liz Goyer gave the police an email supposedly written by Amy. The email included a confession to kidnapping Carrie, along with specific details about the crime. According to the confession, Carrie had been stabbed in the stomach or chest area before her body was disposed of. The email also revealed information about Carrie's car and home that had not been publicly disclosed. According to an investigative spokeswoman, Liz provided detectives with information that only someone intimately involved in the crime could have known. In doing so, she inadvertently implicated herself in Carrie Farver's murder. The letter made it clear that the crime occurred in a car, prompting authorities to re-examine the victim's vehicle. Upon removing the seat covers and fabric, specialists discovered a bloodstain belonging to Carrie Farver. Liz managed to send messages posing as Carrie without arousing suspicion, but it's unclear how. Reports suggest that Liz Goliarv led a double life, dating both Dave and a man named Garrett. Notably, Garrett's IP address was linked to messages sent under Carrie's name. When questioned, Garrett revealed that he had been in a long-term relationship with Liz. Out of kindness, Garrett invited Liz to move in with him and his children after a fire. However, their relationship became complicated and deteriorated significantly once they started living together. Garrett would often take care of Liz's children while she isolated herself in her room or left the house. Garrett was shocked by what the police told him. It was discovered that Liz spent 40 to 50 hours a week pretending to be a missing woman. Although her room was messy, no significant evidence was found. However, investigators did discover several cell phones and electronic devices in the last place she stayed. In late December 2016, Skromane Liz was charged with first-degree murder. The county prosecutor commented on the complexity of the investigation, stating that most murders are dark, but this crime was particularly bizarre. It would take some convincing to make someone believe it actually happened. Liz's actions, including letting her dog die in a fire she set herself and shooting herself in the thigh, were attempts to deflect suspicion from herself. Liz's attorney, James Martin Davis, believed the case against her was weak, since it was largely based on circumstantial evidence. Key pieces of evidence were missing, including Carrie's body and the crime weapon, and Liz had not confessed to the crime. In fact, there was no conclusive proof that Carrie was even dead. The defense team requested a mistrial, which would allow a judge to determine the extent of Skromane's guilt. The prosecution presented a substantial amount of complex electronic evidence, as well as physical evidence. They argued that the amount of blood found on the passenger seat of Carrie's car supported the theory that she had been stabbed. Investigators also found a direct link between Skromane and Carrie's murder by analyzing a memory card that Skromane had used around the time Carrie went missing. The memory card, which was found in a tablet stored at Dave's residence, contained deleted images. It was clear that the foot belonged to a people who had been deceased for several years. Notably, Carrie had a similar tattoo among her distinguishing features. Her mother later confirmed that the tattoo indeed belonged to Carrie. The photo solidified the conviction of Skromane Liz was predator. The judge ruled her guilty of first-degree murder and handed down a life sentence without parole, stating that Carrie Farver did not disappear by choice but was tragically murdered. Authorities suspect that Skromane murdered Carrie, allowed her body to decompose, and then burned the remains to eliminate all evidence. Motivated by jealousy, she decided to eliminate her rival. After disposing of Carrie, Skromane took her cell phone and used it to send messages that would make Farver appear unstable and win back Dave's favor. When this plan succeeded, Skromane wanted to eliminate Amy as well, but she became too entangled in her own scheme and ultimately fell into her own trap. Skromane, also known as Liz, was also found guilty of arson for setting fire to her own home in August 2013 and attempting to blame it on Carrie. The fire destroyed the house and killed pets, resulting in an additional 20-year prison sentence. She is currently serving her sentence at the Nebraska Correctional Center for women despite maintaining her innocence. Dave revealed that he received thousands of emails and text messages signed by Carrie over the years. However, he claimed that he never noticed Carrie stalking him during their relationship, which contrasts with his experience with Skromane. So what happened to Carrie's son, Maxwell Farver? According to his LinkedIn profile, he followed in his mother's footsteps and became a computer programmer. He graduated from the University of Iowa with a degree in software engineering and data science, and is now married. Although it's unlikely he's forgotten the past, he may have found some peace with his new family. As for Dave Kroppa, he now lives a private life, away from the public eye. He doesn't have a public account on any social media platform. This disturbing crime story is a harsh reminder of the complexities and manipulation that can occur in human relationships. It highlights how vulnerable we can be in our own surroundings, unaware of the true nature of those around us. Years have passed since Alyssa Burkett's life was tragically cut short. Her daughter Willow has grown up in a loving family surrounded by the care of her grandparents. Each year on Alyssa's birthday, they visit her grave remembering her beauty, kindness, and boundless love. The memory of Alyssa lives on in the hearts of her loved ones, in every beat of little Willow's heart. And while the pain of loss will never fade, they know Alyssa will always be with them in their thoughts, actions, and hopes for a better future. Her story is a sad but important reminder of how fragile life is, and how important it is to appreciate loved ones while they are close by. Alyssa Burkett was born on the December 31st, 1995 in Mesquite, Texas to Teresa Burkett and Joshua Forsyth. She had 3 sisters, Nikki, Madison, and Taylor, and 2 brothers, Lamden and Tyler. From a young age, Alyssa displayed creative inclinations. At the age of 7, she dreamed of becoming a fashion designer and crafting her own clothing. She enthusiastically sketched designs for future outfits. Her grandfather, Russell Forsyth, a songwriter, encouraged his granddaughter's passion and hoped she would continue his legacy. However, at the age of 13, Alyssa changed her plans and decided to pursue a career in law. She explained to her grandfather that she enjoyed arguing and felt a calling in it. Russell supported his granddaughter's choice, albeit warning about the necessity of diligent study on this path. After graduating from Royce City High School, Alyssa enrolled in a local college. At 18, she discovered she was expecting a child with her boyfriend, Andrew Bird, who was 9 years her senior. This unplanned pregnancy caught Alyssa off guard and compelled her to reassess her life plans. Alyssa parted ways with Andrew, deciding to raise her daughter on her own. She dropped out of college and dedicated herself entirely to motherhood. On the December 31st, 2019, her 20th birthday, Alyssa gave birth to a healthy baby girl whom she named Willow. Despite the challenges, Alyssa strived to be an exemplary mother. Her relatives noted that she wanted to provide her daughter with a stable and loving family, a privilege she was deprived of in her own childhood due to her parents' divorce. On her social media platforms, Alyssa appeared vivacious and open. She shared family photos, thoughts, and interests. Those close to her described her as straightforward, energetic with a heart of gold and a radiant smile. Alyssa worked tirelessly to provide for her daughter. She was an assistant at a real estate firm and an employee at a management company. At the time of her demise, she was working at Greentree, a residential real estate company. She was stubborn, determined, sometimes selfish, but you couldn't stay mad at her for long. She had eternal beauty and charm, reminisced her grandfather Russell. He and the entire family were devastated when Alyssa's life tragically ended at the age of 24. Alyssa Burkett met Andrew Bird in her teenage years. He was 9 years her senior and appeared as a mysterious bad boy. Despite the protests of her relatives, Alyssa began to court him. The relationship was unstable and complex. Bird did not work and relied on Alyssa for support, yet he was possessive, causing scenes and monitoring every move of the young woman. Friends advised her to break up with him multiple times, but she always returned. In January 2019, 23-year-old Alyssa discovered she was pregnant with Bird's child. She decided to keep the baby, although she doubted Andrew as a future father. Eventually, she left him, choosing to raise her daughter on her own. On December 31st, 2019, Alyssa gave birth to a girl named Willow. With the help of her family, especially her grandparents, she tried to provide her daughter with a peaceful childhood and kept Barrett away, deeming him unreliable. However, Barrett was unwilling to back down. He initiated a fierce legal battle for custody of Willow, declaring he would achieve his goal at any cost, stating that nothing will stop him. Alyssa feared retaliation from his side. In April 2020, just 4 months after Willow's birth, a new woman entered Andrew's life, 22-year-old Holly Elkins. Elkins quickly moved in with Bird and began making plans for their life together and raising his daughter. The appearance of the young stepmother only intensified the conflict. Elkins saw Elkins as a rival and actively sought to eliminate her from Bird's life. She positioned herself as the perfect mother for Willow. Alyssa felt a growing threat from her ex-boyfriend and his fiancée, GCE. Friends advised her to be cautious and wary of the worst. Little did she know that her life would soon be cut short by their hands. Shortly after Andrew Bird and Holly Elkins started their relationship, they launched a full-scale campaign to persecute Alyssa Burkett. Their aim was to completely destroy her reputation and strip her of parental rights to gain full custody of Bird's daughter, Willow. In her messages, Elkins openly expressed her obsession with removing Alyssa as a mother. She wrote to Bird that Alyssa controls him, puts him first, and that he must show his submission to his ex and deal with this mess. Elkins insulted Alyssa, calling her a liar, stupid, and a bad man. She instigated Bird, claiming that Alyssa stood in the way of their happy family life with Willow and urged him to take radical actions. One instance of slander was not enough for Elkins. Together with Bird, they installed a GPS tracker on Alyssa's car, monitoring her every move. Elkins then anonymously called 911, falsely reporting Alyssa for allegedly driving erratically, trying to discredit her to the police. Another time, Elkins went to the police and falsely accused Alyssa's mother of attacking her. To corroborate her story, she even deliberately scratched her own chest. The couple hired a private detective to find dirt on Alyssa and her new partner. Although the investigator found nothing incriminating, Bird and Elkins persisted. In September 2020, they themselves planted drugs and unregistered weapons in Alyssa's car and anonymously informed the police that Alyssa was allegedly dealing drugs from her trunk. During questioning, Alyssa tearfully insisted she had no involvement with drugs. She immediately suspected Bird's involvement, trying to tarnish her in the eyes of child services and the police. Unfortunately, she couldn't prove it. The persecution took on an increasingly menacing tone. A week before the murder, Elkins wrote to Bird, "I hope you can handle this." She demanded that he go or die for her, clearly hinting of the impending crime. Unbeknownst to herself, Alyssa was in mortal danger. She had only a few days left to live. Following direct instructions from his fiancée, G.C. Holly Elkins, Andrew Bird began the direct preparation for the murder of Alyssa Burkett. They acted deliberately and methodically, planning every detail of the crime. On September 10, 2020, just 3 weeks before the tragedy, Elkins accompanied Bird to a sporting goods store. There, he purchased a black raincoat in cash, which he would later use in the attack. Elkins clearly assisted him in selecting suitable attire for the crime. On September 14th, they visited a pharmacy where Elkins bought dark foundation and other cosmetics for makeup. Evidently, she planned to disguise Bird to hinder his identification by witnesses. Later, the police would find this makeup in Bird's car, along with wipes containing traces of makeup. On September 19th, the couple visited a hardware store where they bought shotgun shells and a large Camillus knife. It was this shotgun and knife that Bird would soon use to carry out his vengeance on the mother of his daughter. Over the past week of September, Elkins inundated Bird with messages, goading him to put the plan into action. She wrote that they needed to deal with this go or die. Elkins explicitly stated that their relationship would be at risk if he did not follow through to the end. Receiving a clear signal, Bird got down to business. The search history on his phone shows that he began looking for information on how to remove gunpowder residue from his hands after a shot. He clearly did not want to leave any traces. 6 days before the attack, Bird bought a used black Ford Expedition advertised. He planned to use it for surveillance on Alyssa and his transportation to the crime scene. The seller later identified Bird as the buyer. A day before the attack, Bird attached a homemade silencer to his .22 caliber pistol. Although he ultimately did not use it in the attack, the mere fact of making the silencer demonstrates the purposefulness of his actions. Finally, on the morning of October 2nd, Bird disguised himself as an African American, donned a black raincoat, and headed to Alyssa's house in a parked SUV nearby. Thanks to Elkins' messages, he knew the victim's daily routine and could anticipate where to find her. The plan was set. Bird and Elkins had considered all the details. They were prepared to ruthlessly execute the mother of 1.5-year-old Willow in broad daylight. There was no turning back. On the morning of October 2nd, 2020, nothing foreshadowed the tragedy. 24-year-old Alyssa Burkett, as usual, dropped off her 1.5-year-old daughter, Willow, at her grandmother's and headed to work at the Green Tree Homes Management Company in Carrollton. She parked her car in front of the office around 9 a.m. and was about to enter the building. At that moment, a black SUV sped towards her car at full speed. A man in a black cloak with a hood and a mask covering his face jumped out of it to call for help. A bloody trail followed her. Noticing the movement, Bird swiftly turned around. He pulled out a large hunting knife from under his cloak and lunged towards Alyssa writhing on the ground. Grabbing her by the hair, he viciously began stabbing her in the neck, chest, and abdomen. In total, Bird inflicted no fewer than 13 stab wounds. From the injuries sustained, Alyssa died on the spot. When her colleagues, hearing the screams, rushed out to the parking lot, they found Alyssa in a pool of blood, her throat slashed. They tried to perform CPR, but in vain. By that time, Bird had already fled in his black SUV, leaving the bloodied knife on the parking lot. Random witnesses described the assailant as a tall, muscular man dressed in all black with a mask or hood on his head. Many mistook him for an African American. At the time of the attack, Holly Elkins, according to her own words, was at home with Bird's daughter, Willow. Thus, she had an alibi. Later, she told the police that Bird allegedly was with her all this time, which turned out to be a lie. The brutal daylight murder in a crowded place shocked the residents of Carrollton. They were puzzled about the motives of the criminal. However, Alyssa's relatives and friends immediately suspected Andrew Bird. They were aware of the protracted conflict between the former partners and feared the worst. Alyssa's mother, barely holding back tears, informed the police of her suspicions regarding Bird. She recounted his threats and obsession with her daughter, the prolonged legal battle for custody of her granddaughter. According to her, Bird had repeatedly stated that the living Alyssa Willow would not get. Thus began one of the most shocking and resonant trials in the history of Texas, a trial that made local residents rethink seemingly the familiar issue of domestic violence and stalking. The name of Alyssa Burkett will long be remembered as a symbol of maternal love and resilience in the face of cruelty. The investigation into Alyssa Burkett's murder began with questioning witnesses of the crime scene. Alyssa's colleagues detailed the appearance and actions of the assailant. Although he wore a mask, his tall stature and muscular build stood out. Some mistakenly took him for an African American. The testimonies of Alyssa's relatives about the prolonged conflict with her former partner, Andrew Bird, immediately made him the prime suspect. Friends and colleagues of Alyssa spoke of his obsession, constant surveillance, and threats. Alyssa's new boyfriend recalled that Bird mentioned their full home addresses, although they had not disclosed this information to him. Detectives began surveillance of Bird's house in Rowlett. Soon, they noticed Bird, accompanied by his fiancée, Holly Elkins, and daughter, Willow, carrying suitcases and bags out of the house, clearly preparing to leave for a long time. When Bird got into the car, the police stopped him on the pretext of lacking a license plate. During the search of the car, men's boots cut into pieces and soaked in bleach were found. Also discovered were remnants of camouflage makeup, napkins with makeup, and burnt parts of a brush for its application. In Baird's house, detectives found even more evidence, primarily batteries for GPS trackers that the criminal attached to the cars of Alyssa and her boyfriend. There was also a homemade silencer for a pistol and a whole arsenal of weapons. But the main discovery was a written script that Bird used when calling the police to report drugs in Alyssa's car. The police seized 3 phones from Baird, including a disposable one. In the search history of one of them, there were inquiries on how to remove gunpowder residue from hands. He was clearly trying to cover his tracks. Meanwhile, on the outskirts of the city, an abandoned black Ford Expedition SUV was discovered. In the cabin, forensic experts found Alyssa's blood and fibers of a fake beard with Andrew's DNA. The car seller identified Bird as the buyer and remembered that he paid in cash and was in a hurry. Forensic examination revealed that the bullet that killed Alyssa was fired from the sawed-off shotgun found in the car. Bird's fingerprints were also found on the handle of a hunting knife. His handwriting was clearly identifiable in the GPS devices and in the calls with false accusations. It seemed that the prosecution had gathered comprehensive evidence of Andrew Bird's guilt. However, the prosecutors also aimed to hold his accomplice, Holly Elkins, accountable. Electronic correspondence between them came to the rescue, showing Elkins' role in planning and inciting the crime. The investigation lasted for several months. During this time, the prosecution meticulously assembled a mosaic of evidence, unequivocally incriminating the ruthless killers of Alyssa Burkett. The jurors were shocked by the cynicism and calculated nature of the criminals. They eagerly awaited the start of the trial to deliver a just verdict. The trial for the murder of Alyssa Burkett began in June 2022, almost 2 years after the tragedy. Sitting in the dock were 35-year-old Andrew Bird and his 23-year-old fiancée Gutka, Holly Elkins. They were charged with stalking, conspiracy, and first-degree murder. From the outset, the prosecutors made it clear that they intended to seek the maximum punishment for both defendants. In their opening statement, they painted a picture for the jurors of a massive conspiracy to take the life of a young mother. The correspondence between Baird and Elkins left no doubt about the meticulous planning of the crime. A key prosecution witness was Christopher Mayo, Alyssa's boyfriend at the time of her death. He told the jurors about months of harassment and persecution orchestrated by Bird and Elkins against them. According to him, Alyssa had mentioned multiple times that Bird seemed like someone capable of killing her. Mayo recounted the phone threats, constant surveillance, and attempts to discredit Alyssa in the eyes of social services and the police. He stated that Elkins was the public master, directing Bird's actions. Her pathological jealousy and obsession with another's child ultimately led to the tragedy. Colleagues and friends of Alyssa shared the grief of the slain mother. Alyssa had confided in them, expressing fear of her unstable ex, feeling constantly watched. A few days before her death, she told a friend, "If something happens to me, know that Andrew did it." Forensic experts presented the jurors with a rich arsenal of physical evidence unequivocally linking Bird to the crime scene. In addition to DNA and fingerprints on the murder weapons, there were traces of gunpowder and disguise fragments in his house and car. However, the nail in the coffin of the trial was the electronic correspondence between Baird and Elkins, eloquently demonstrating their joint plans. Phrases like, "I hope you can handle this, do it or die for me, this be asterisk, teach must disappear," littered their messages in the days leading up to the murder. Bird's defense attempted to argue for the lack of premeditation in his actions. Supposedly, he only intended to scare his ex, but in a fit of rage, miscalculated his force. The defense emphasized the emotional distress and stress from the prolonged legal battle, but the correspondence in meticulous preparation for the crime completely refuted these speculations. Particularly telling were Bird's internet searches on removing gunpowder traces. Such actions do not align with those of someone who accidentally turned to violence. Elkins outright denied her involvement, citing an alibi. However, even here, her position was woven with white lies. Messages where she urged her partner to deal with the rival literally put a nail in the coffin of her innocence, at least in incitement. In the end, Bird admitted guilt on the main points. Apparently, he decided to mitigate his fate, avoiding a life sentence. He detailed, albeit quite impassively, the circumstances of the murder, his preparation, and motives. His key motive was an obsession with Willow, his daughter. Elkins stood her ground to the end. Even after the guilty verdict, she continued to proclaim her innocence and the injustice of the sentence. However, this did not help her escape a harsh punishment. In May 2023, the judge pronounced the verdict. Andrew Bird received 43 years in prison, effectively a life sentence. Holly Elkins was sentenced to 20 years for complicity. The courtroom erupted in applause. Justice, albeit delayed, prevailed. The killers of Alyssa Burkett received their due. The loved ones of Alice, with tears in their eyes, expressed gratitude to the prosecutors and jurors. "Nothing will bring back our girl, but we are thankful that the guilty have been punished, and no one else will suffer at their hands," said Alice's mother to the journalists. This tragedy will serve as a bitter lesson for all victims of domestic violence for a long time. The untimely and cruel death of Alice Burkett shook the residents of Texas and the entire America. A young mother, beloved daughter and sister, she was killed in the most despicable and inhumane manner by the hands of her former partner and the father of her child. Her story became a tragic symbol of the epidemic of domestic violence, claiming thousands of lives annually. Despite the just verdict for the killers, Alice's family does not hide. Their loss is irreplaceable. "She was a ray of light in our lives," recalls her mother Teresa, determined with a huge, loving heart. She lived for her daughter and dreamed of giving her the best. Most painful was the fact that Alice sensed the danger and repeatedly reported it to her loved ones and the police. Alas, no one took her words seriously until it was too late. Perhaps more decisive intervention could have prevented the tragedy. She told me, "Mom, he will kill me." I know, but what could I do? The police shrugged, saying, "Until he does something, we are powerless." Alice's Aunt Shelley shares in tears. Particular concern arises for Alice's daughter, 2-year-old Willow. She lost her mother at such a tender age and will surely not fully grasp the extent of her loss for a long time. Custody of the girl was granted to her maternal grandparents. They vowed to do everything to ensure Willow grows up in love and never forgets her mother. Every day, I show her photos of Alice, tell her how wonderful she was. Willow is still young, but she already reaches for the pictures, caressing them with her finger. "Despite everything, we will continue to live on for her," says Alice's grandmother, Teresa, and Alice's story raises uncomfortable yet critically important questions. Why do signals of domestic violence victims often go unnoticed? How can we improve the protection and response system to complaints? What prevents us all from being more vigilant about the problems of friends and family? Experts urge early recognition of warning signs of abusive relationships, pathological jealousy, control, isolation from friends and family, outbursts of aggression. Victims need to know they are not alone and can seek help at any time by contacting hotlines or crisis centers. The most important thing is not to remain silent, not to tolerate, not to consider it normal. Violence is never acceptable, and it rarely stops on its own. Alice was strong, but even the strong sometimes need help, emphasizes psychologist Anna Byers, leading a support group for abuse survivors. Alice's death should not be in vain. Her case once again shows how important it is to take threats and signs of violence seriously, especially when the well-being of children is at stake. No family drama is worth a lost life. The name of Alice Burkett will forever remain in the memory of her loved ones and fellow citizens. Her photos and posts on social media continue to gather likes, comments, and words of support even years after the tragedy. Many see in her an example of resilience and dedication to loved ones despite all trials. Rest in peace, dear Alice. You will forever remain in our hearts. We will continue your work and love Willow as you loved her. Justice has prevailed, and now you can rest peacefully. We will always remember your goodness, wilt her grandfather Russell on the first anniversary of her death. Perhaps someday in the future, Willow will be able to read these words and learn what an amazing woman her mother was. A woman who fought for her until her last breath and did not let her love fade even in the face of monstrous cruelty. Her short but bright life will forever be an example for all mothers. Alice Burkett's story is not just another criminal chronicle. It is a tragedy of a young woman who only wanted one thing, to love and raise her daughter. But her life was cut short by those who vowed to protect her. Her child's father and his new partner. Obsession, jealousy, desire for control. These were the true motives driving Andrew Bird and Holly Elkins. Neither pleas from Alice nor fear of the law nor thoughts of the well-being of little Willow stopped them. In pursuit of a sick passion, they crossed the final line. The most frightening thing is that Alice's case is just the tip of the iceberg. Hundreds of women across the country face domestic violence, harassment, and threats daily. Many are afraid to speak openly about it, considering their burden shameful. Unfortunately, the outcome of this silence can be fatal. Alice's example reminds us we must not turn a blind eye to signs of abuse in our own lives or the lives of our loved ones. Pathological jealousy is not love. Constant control is not care, and outbursts of aggression are not character. These are warning bells, SOS signals that cannot be ignored. If you have become a victim of domestic violence, know that you are not alone. There are people in organizations ready to lend a helping hand. Do not be afraid to take this step. Do not wait until the situation becomes deadly. Your safety and right to a life without fear are paramount above all other considerations. It is our collective responsibility to raise the younger generation in respect and acceptance, to teach them to resolve conflicts with words, not fists or guns, to explain that love does not tolerate violence. Perhaps then our daughters will no longer perish at the hands of those they once let into their hearts. I don't know if Willow will ever understand why and for what her mother died, but I know for sure Alice loved her more than life. Her last thoughts were surely about her daughter. And there, in the heavens, she continues to watch over her little one, said her brother Landon at her funeral. Someday, Willow will grow up and be able to read this story herself, the story of her mother's life, love, and struggle. May the memory of Alice be a source of strength and faith in a better future for her. And for all of us, a bitter lesson, a reminder, and a call to action. We owe it to her. We owe it to each other. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.